Good afternoon and welcome to today's program titled Attracting Patients Online in Their Time of Need. I'm Tom Valentino, Senior Editor of Addiction Professional. Today's program is sponsored by Foundations Recovery Network and Urgent Medical Billing. Thank you to our sponsors and to our audience for giving us your time and attention today. Before we get started, we have a few details we'd like to go over. Please use the Q&A box below the slides to submit a question at any time during our presentation. You don't have to wait until the end. To download a copy of today's presentation, please click the link in the Resources area in the top right corner of your screen. If you have any technical issues during the program, please click the red Live Help button below the slides to troubleshoot the issue. Finally, for those of you who tweet, please tweet along with us using our hashtag today, APLiveWebinar. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. Brian Davis is Senior Vice President of Healthcare at Scorpion. Brian leads the digital marketing agency's healthcare team, overseeing its strategy and business development. His team has helped over 200 healthcare organizations develop and execute successful healthcare marketing strategies through state-of-the-art websites and results-driven online media campaigns. Also speaking today is Danielle Bulger. Danielle is a senior account executive on Google's health systems team, supporting the digital marketing strategies and advertising programs of large hospitals and behavioral health systems. With a focus on driving profitable growth, Danielle specializes in leveraging consumer insights to develop patient and physician engagement strategies using Google products. Thank you to Brian and Danielle for taking the time to speak with us today. And with that, the audience is yours.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate it, and we really appreciate the opportunity to take some of your time today to share some strategies on how the internet can be used as a valuable tool in attracting more patients when they need your help the most. Again, the title of today's presentation, Attracting Patients Online in Their Time of Need, an executive primer on digital strategy for the addiction recovery industry. Again, you've been introduced to myself and Danielle. And the objective of today's presentation is to really give all of you, and I know that not everyone on the phone is involved in the business of marketing, but to really give everyone a baseline of understanding on what the opportunity is with the web and where there's specific strategies that can be deployed at your organization to attract more patients, again, in their time of need. The learning objectives for today's presentation include really three things. Number one, we were going to give you an overview of how addiction treatment centers can better serve their patients through an improved digital strategy. We're going to share some practices for connecting prospective patients with addiction recovery services right in their moment of need, and then also identify what are the things that you need in place to maximize your digital marketing efficiency. It's not lost on us at Scorpion or the folks at Google on how important it is that these things work correctly, and the real gravity of the types of marketing that we're doing here, which isn't like any other kind of marketing. There are people's lives at stake, and we'll talk about why putting these things together in the right way really is important in terms of delivering more patients and reaching the maximum number of patients that are out there. From an agenda, we're going to quickly talk about what is it like for the patient to look for your services in their time of need. What does consumer data show us? What does it show us about that experience? And Danielle is going to share some insights from Google's consumer marketing data and their reports on what that behavior looks like and where there's opportunity to provide a better solution than what many people find. Then we're going to talk about what is it like to develop a rescue plan. There's people out there that are looking. What are the things that need to be in place to make sure that you're able to attract patients, and then get them to take action in their time of need. And then finally, talk about the right elements you've got to have in place, and then give you an example of what does success look like. And whenever you're doing everything right, what are the potential outcomes that are available? And then we'll take some Q&A from the audience. So first, we want to talk about that moment of uncertainty, those moments of uncertainty that happen when a patient or a caregiver is looking for help, again, for themselves or a loved one. And we know that in the United States, we have a big problem. The amount of folks that could use your services is increasing, and there are a lot of them that need your help that don't find it. In fact, recent studies show that there's 20.4 million people that need substance abuse treatment each year, but only 17% receive it, which means that there are a lot of people out there that are left adrift and don't receive the help they need. And so when we start to think about the reasons why that is the situation, there are a lot of them, and it's not a simple solution. But one of them that really strikes home with us is that 1 in 8 adults who admit they need substance abuse treatment fail to get help because they simply don't know where they need to go for treatment and don't find the treatment they need, which to us, again, working across multiple healthcare verticals is something that is really the last thing we ever want to hear. And it's certainly something that many of our clients are passionate about saying is they never want to hear a patient say, or a patient's family say, I wish I would have known about you guys. I wish I would have known you were here. I wish I would have known you could do this. I wish I would have known that your program could have benefited myself or my family. And we see this in the headlines. Addiction treatments are hard to find even as overdose death source. So the stakes are high to make sure that your capabilities are getting out there to the people that could really benefit from them. So from there, if we really zero in on that moment of decision where a patient or their family member is in that moment, something has happened, or they finally reached the point where they know they've got to do something different. What happens in that moment from making the decision that I've got to do something to the time I'm connected with a provider that can help me? And what we find is that during that period of time, what happens is uncertainty in a time that really requires rapid action. And that delay can have significant impacts in potentially the patient's outcomes or even their lives. And so that's where we really want to zero in on now. And Danielle is going to share some of the data that Google, as one of maybe the largest aggregator of consumer online behavior data in the world, is going to share some data that they have in terms of what does that process look like online from the patient's perspective.
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, definitely in these uncertain times when addicts or their loved ones are seeking help, they first and foremost turn to the internet. And you may ask, well, why? Well, there's a few reasons that we found that they're turning to the internet during this time. The first is it's easy. The internet's become a place where we do everything from buying our toilet paper to looking up recipes. So it's also easy to just start researching and start your question process there. So what symptoms do I have? What treatments are available? Do I have a problem? What does having a problem look like? It's anonymous. You can ask questions of the internet that you may be otherwise afraid or embarrassed to ask. So often it's safer than going to a medical professional or to a friend or family. And it's fast. Many of the treatment research is being done on mobile. In fact, we kind of hit that tipping point where we're seeing more than 50% of the searches in addiction treatment happening on mobile. And your phone's typically, arm's length away. Many of us sleep with it, next to us at night. So you're getting those answers fast in real time. And it's empowering. Consumers in any industry, but especially as we think about the medical world, they want to feel empowered with information. And the research they're doing helps to put them in the driver's seat, or their loved one who's going to maybe research or talk to a medical professional about someone that they think has a problem. It's giving them the information and the connections that they need. And we'll get into video a little bit later, but video especially kind of rings true with being empowering because you're feeling a connection, you're forming a community with the content that you're engaging with. In this year, we ran a study with a company called Compete. They're part of Millward Brown. And we did two parts of that study. One was asking patients or their caregivers who sought treatment or who signed up for treatment. We asked them about the process that they went through, and then we also looked at actual clickstream behavior. So what Brian was talking about, we've got access to this just humongous data set, and we can aggregate that and look at some of that data. And the first thing that we want to talk about here is that of those that had entered treatment, the majority, 61%, said the internet was actually its number one confidant when researching options, so far ahead of any friends, family, and medical professionals. And the other thing to note is that they're using a lot of different resources on the internet. So on average, they use 9 different resources during the process. So that could be video or forums or treatment center websites or medical websites. And last, important to note here, the number one thing that they're doing is something that, all of us here on this webinar today do all the time. They're searching. 88% of patients are using search to find this treatment center. But it's certainly not, a one and done. I think it would be a lot easier if it kind of looked like you go to google.com, you search for drug addiction treatment, you see an ad for a local facility, you go to the website, call the number, sign up for treatment. That would certainly make our jobs as both clinicians here on the call with us today and marketers a lot easier, and we would see that 17 million number that Brian referenced earlier go down drastically, but it's not that black and white. Instead, what we see is that there's a lot of uncertainty in the research process. So in the survey data, we found a couple of interesting things. We saw that 2 in 5 patients do not have a treatment process or treatment center in mind when they start the process. And they're open to learning what is out there and maybe new to the world of addiction treatment, especially for those caregivers who make up a pretty big percentage of the ones that are doing the research from the onset, that they don't have a center in mind. And even those that did have a center in mind, 1 in 3 changed their minds about the center before they actually schedule a visit. So maybe there has been, some place in their neighborhood, a place that a friend or family member has recommended, but once they do some of the research on their own, they are making a more informed decision. They're open to changing that path to treatment. And this uncertainty is also demonstrated in the number of searches. Like I said earlier, this isn't a one search equals book treatment process. They're searching over 10 times before they actually do something or convert on a treatment center website. When I say convert on a website, starting a chat with a therapist, filling out a form, making a phone call, actually doing something more than just engaging with the content. So they're actually doing something. So what does all this mean? We know that there are a large number of people that need help, and we also know that they are using the internet to search for answers and that there may be confusion and uncertainty during the process that is leading to a void or delay in treatment. Every day, potential patients are not getting the help they need because they can't find it. So I ask everybody that's joined us here today, where are you during all this uncertainty? Is your voice reaching the patient that is looking for answers? Are you answering their questions for them? And while the gravity of the situation is not lost on us here at Scorpion and Google, we do know that if we do our jobs well as marketers, as digital evangelists, as content producers that answer these very important questions, we can help save lives. And for me personally, that's why I'm passionate about the work I do with my clients. I was just up in the lunchroom sitting with some other account executives on different pods or different teams here at Google, and those in retail or fast food or mortgage. At the end of the day, they're not saving lives with the work that they do through marketing, but what we do, we can. And connecting the patient with the right solution can greatly help those affected by addiction. So that's why I have some passion behind this in the work that I do. So while we do want to have respect for the moments in which we are trying to connect, let's put on our marketing hats for a bit and think about the online marketing strategies that we need to be deploying in order to reach and help our audience in their time of need. And there's 3 marketing objectives that we're going to walk you through today. First, I'm going to talk to you about how you can broadcast your services on the web. So we talked a lot about the questions that people are asking. well, where are they asking these questions and how can you connect with them? And then I'll turn it back to Brian, and he's going to walk you through how you as a treatment center can help reduce some of the uncertainty during this very trying time. And finally, we'll look at how you can manage the process efficiently, and so that the marketing dollars that you do choose to spend to bring these patients in your doors will equate to, patients in beds and lives helped as a result of your services. So as we have seen, there are people looking for you, and lots of people need help. So let's talk about how we can connect with them. And we're going to go through 4 different tactics, if you will, here today. Paid search, video, and then display ads and social media. And the first one is paid search. And I realize that there's probably we run the gamut on this call right now with those that have dabbled with paid search or pay-per-click advertising before and those that haven't. So I want to talk about this in kind of its most simplest of terms. But paid search is really where we are able to meet the needs of the hand raisers. So these are folks that are asking questions, doing searches, whether that be the addict themselves or a concerned loved one. So this is like when someone goes to google.com and searches rehab, drug rehab, addiction hotline, rehab centers, alcohol rehab. And at that moment in time, when they're doing that search, you have an opportunity to align your treatment center or your type of treatment or, your doctors and trained professionals to be the answer when it's appropriate. And it's immediate. So the first bullet point there, it's the immediacy. So you are getting your message out there right when they search. You show up on the results page, and you are the answer for them. But more than that, it's an area where you can be relevant. So you have the choice by kind of the type of keywords that you want to play in the auction with to only answer the searches where you can provide an answer. So if someone is looking for or searching for a treatment that you don't offer, you can choose to not show up when they make that search. Let somebody else be that answer. And you can be targeted. So if you're an outpatient facility that's in Phoenix, Arizona, then you probably only want to show up for searches that are happening in, say, a 25-mile radius of your facility because you're going to be relevant. That's a targeted audience to what you can provide service for. And why do we care about paid search? 4 million searches this year for addiction treatment on google.com. So that's 4 million questions being asked. That's 4 million times somebody raised their hand and looked for help. And that's 4 million times that you have the choice to reach out to this person that's in need and provide an answer or provide a solution for them. And in the study that we did, we found that searchers are valuable. And like we said, they're informed, they're empowered, they've found they're looking and they're reading information, and they're more likely, once they finally land on the treatment center website, they're twice as likely to actually take action once they're there because they've done the research, because they're informed, because they're ready to take it to the next step. So that's a valuable audience to want to get in front of. The second thing we'll talk about is video. And YouTube actually is the second largest search engine behind google.com. So every time we are thinking about the amount of queries, keywords, searches that are happening on google.com, we really have to kind of parlay that with what's the activity that's also happening on YouTube. And every month there are 1 million searches for videos on YouTube in the drug addiction category. So that was 4 million a year on google.com, 1 million a month on youtube.com. But what's even more interesting to me in the YouTube front is that people aren't just watching one video. Where we only saw 1 million searches, there were 20 million video views. So this is a place where, patients or caregivers are really leaned in. They're looking at, reviews of facilities. They're listening to others tell their story. They're, watching videos about treatment. They're looking at people's recovery and kind of where they're at now. They get very emotionally involved with the content, and those videos are often a lifeline to those that are in the research because it's providing kind of real content, and they can attach to that content. Especially on mobile. You're watching a video on mobile, it's, inches from your eyes. You're in a leaned-in experience. It's right there in front of you. So they're really consuming just epic amounts of content each month. And these videos matter, kind of going back to the same study that we did with Compete. Of those that checked into treatment, 52% of either the patients or caregivers, whoever was responsible for kind of the check-in at treatment, had watched videos leading up to the treatment. And they found them to be very influential in helping them to make a decision on treatment. And this is really powerful. So a question, for the audience, does your facility have video content that you could use to speak to potential patients? Do you have those testimonials? Do you have a video that shows what it's going to be like once you check in? What are my surroundings going to be like? It's a time where people are very uncertain and they're very confused and they're not sure what's going to happen next. So video can, bridge that comfort zone and make them feel a little bit safer about where they're about to go.
I'm going to add something here, Danielle. Just a couple of things that we also see is that video itself as a piece of content is very effective at instantly reducing uncertainty. That's something we're going to talk about here in a second. But in terms of YouTube, it's also important that we I think most of us will think about YouTube as a content hub or center of content where we find content. Maybe we would just post content. We post videos about our center or our testimonials from our patients. But it's also important to understand that YouTube is a marketing platform as well. So you can use YouTube to target video advertising and other forms of advertising on YouTube to patients in geographic areas or with certain demographics and a number of other different targeting mechanisms that are available. Target them specifically with the types of either advertisements or video pre-rolls or just even surfacing recommended videos and things like that to people that may benefit from those things. So that's part of a comprehensive strategy, and it really is. It plays well when you're doing all of these things together. Again, which we'll talk about here in a second. But it's important to know that YouTube is not just content; it's actually a marketing platform as well.
Absolutely, thanks, Brian. And the last tactic that we want to talk about here is display and social media. And this is a great way to really drive awareness. And unlike search, this is, display and social media is a way to be in front of your potential patients at all times, even when they aren't actively doing the research or actively raising their hand. And you can assert your brand as an authority and act as a resource to keep your audience informed. So again, the awareness, the brand authority, the targeting. And the same things that we talked about when we talked about PPC or paid search, you can target a specific audience, whether that's demographics or location. Who do you want to get your message in front of? Who do you want to continue to help? And with that, I'll turn it back to Brian to talk us through how to alleviate some of this uncertainty.
Thanks, Danielle. So as Danielle reviewed, there's really kind of four primary broadcast channels that we can use. Paid search, which gets you right in front of people when the moment they're looking. Video, which is a great piece of channel for quickly reducing uncertainty and helping people really connect with your brand. Display and social media ads, which really allow you to continually publish the fact that you exist and the unique benefits that you have to people in areas or with demographics that may most benefit from your services. That's the first part. So you've gotten there and you've gotten your message in front of the person that's looking. But just as equally important is what happens next. And I had a senior marketing executive, one of our clients recently say, we can do a great job broadcasting what we do. But when somebody clicks and actually comes to visit and learn about us, if we don't do that really, really well, it's like advertising for the competition. And so we need to make sure that entire experience all the way through the process is built around intentionally reducing the uncertainty of the patient and really thinking about that. I mean, and there's a lot of details to this, and that's why it makes sense to have people to help you with this. But we'll talk about each one of these elements. Number one, top tactic is make sure your web presence is professional. We'll talk about that. Be able to showcase and differentiate what you do. Answer important questions, as Danielle mentioned, or think about the questions that the patients or the caregivers may have and make sure you're answering them. And then finally, back it up and share proof from folks that have had an experience, a positive experience with your brand. So let's talk about each one of those individually. So again, you've seen the ad, you've clicked on it, and then you arrive at something. Maybe you're on a mobile device, maybe you're on a desktop computer or a tablet. And what that next happens, and we've all experienced this, I'm sure everybody on the phone has experienced this, is when we've clicked on an ad or a link on a website or what we thought would lead us to an answer, and it leads us to not the answer, or to a website that doesn't look good or render on my device the right way, and so I have to zoom, or a link is broken, or there's other problems with the experience. We see this all the time, and this is one of the things that we help many of our clients solve, is to get that moment right. Because what happens in those first few seconds after they've clicked and they think they're going to find the answer can be the difference between them choosing you or them going somewhere else. Because what happens in those first few seconds is that first impression, and it's important to get that right. And there's a lot of subtleties to how you do that, but it's really important to look at that experience through the eyes of the patient to make sure that when they arrive, it's a thoughtful experience that's very high quality, that has no mistakes, and leads them to the answers that they need very quickly without overwhelming them. Just enough information and not too much to give them, just to give them what they need and nothing more, is one of the real things that we see often is missed. And again, if you don't have this piece right, you can broadcast all you want, but if this piece isn't right, then there's a good chance that people will leave and not come back. In fact, some Google data recently showed, and Danielle, you might know the exact statistic, but I believe it was something on the order of 60 to 70% of people, the data shows that 60 to 70% of the people that have a negative mobile experience with a website leave and they never come back. And so if that piece isn't 3 seconds, exactly.
Sorry,
So
3 seconds seems to be the threshold. If your website isn't loading in 3 seconds, you're losing them.
Yeah, so it's got to load in 3 seconds, and then when they arrive, it's got to answer questions quickly. Again, this morning I had to take my daughter to a medical facility nearby, and their website is not very helpful. And I had to zoom and try to figure out the right directions, and it was a mess. So not ideal experience. I had a CEO friend of mine who runs a hospital tell me that, this is so critical, and he's really zoned in on this. He said this is such a critical piece to make sure the entire experience, not just the advertising, but also what happens all the way through, is so important to get that right. Because his comment was, if the patient and their caregivers can't trust us to do the little things right, then how can they trust us to do the big things? And this, frankly, is a little thing in relative terms to the work that the folks on the call do. The next part of that equation is really, once they get there, is there something different about your facility, your programs, the experience the patient will have with you, your location? What are the things that make you different than others? And again, this is something we see often, that from the view of the patient when they are looking, and again, as Danielle mentioned, they're searching lots of websites, they're going through lots of different channels online, and they're experiencing different environments. When they arrive at a website, a lot of them, frankly, in the industry kind of look the same, and sometimes it's difficult to tell what differentiates one program versus another. And so that's where there really needs to be an intentional, and thoughtful process of thinking about what is it about our experience that's different, what are the unique values of our program, and they can be a number of different things, but that needs to be brought out in that messaging so that when they have that experience and they found you, they immediately associate something different with you and something that is unique about your program. And then thirdly, you want to make sure that you're answering the important questions. And again, we see it many times in healthcare situations where the tendency is to get very clinical and have lots of clinical information on websites, and that's just, unfortunately, that's not the way patients think or talk. And it's really important to answer questions in their language. And you all know what are the main questions people ask, and it's important to bring that type of information right up front, so that, again, they have a good experience, they start getting the questions answered that are on their mind, and you're also showing them that you know what their questions are probably going to be, and you're answering them in anticipation of them having them. It really is an immediate way to start to generate trust with someone that's looking for help, is that you can quickly show, hey, we know what you're going through, and these are probably the top 10 questions that are on your mind. Here's all the answers. And that's something, again, we see it missed a lot of times, and so something you want to make sure is done really well and really thoughtfully. And then finally, you want to make sure that you've got some social proof. It's never good enough to say how great we are to the patients. You really need other people saying how great you are. And that can be other medical professionals. That can be, in an ideal scenario, that's your patients or their family members. There's nothing more powerful or differentiating than having patients that have had a successful experience or a successful treatment or have gone on to really outstanding outcomes after treatment with your team or your facility. And bringing those types of things right to the front, again, is that final check. It's, number one, have I found a really high-quality organization? Well, I can tell that because the web experience is really thoughtful, and in 2 or 3 seconds I felt comfortable and I found the information I needed. They clearly know what's on my mind. They've answered those questions for me. And then finally, here's a bunch of people that say this has been great, that are like me. And that was all brought right to the forefront. And this all is kind of proven out how powerful specifically this piece is by some of the data that Google has provided. Danielle, you want to talk about this piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, we're looking at what will drive somebody to go to treatment. And what's surprising to me is, it's not necessarily about what's in their back door, what they've, had friends or families go to. So the location and kind of what's around them isn't the number one driver. It's really that reputation. And, reputation is something that you can control. We talk about video, we talk about website content. You have the opportunity to put the best face of your facility out there. And this is something that really matters to people during that decision-making process.
And this is something that we come across in our work all the time, is that many times, and I'm sure many of the folks on the call can connect with this, is that the work that you all do is amazing. I mean, you're truly impacting people's lives in the long term, saving lives, changing outcomes. There's a million good things that you're doing, and what we find, unfortunately, is that many times none of those stories, none of that that goodwill that you're creating every day is brought forward. People don't know. Only the people that know about it know about it. Maybe you hear about it through word of mouth, but in terms of what you find online, well, those stories don't get surfaced, or those outcomes don't get surfaced. And so it's really important that those things are played out because, again, great reputation, a good name is better than great riches. Well, this is true here too. So just to kind of summarize, once you've broadcast your capabilities out to the marketplace and you're putting your message right in front of people online where they are, they've found you. That journey of finding you needs to be one that is intentionally reducing their uncertainty by thinking about a very patient-focused approach to everything you're doing in terms of the web experience, but also the content and the execution of that, of whatever content you're putting out on the web, to make sure that it's really focused on giving them the information they need, anticipating their needs, and then giving them a place to take action. And hopefully pick up the phone, call you, set an appointment, engage on chat, as Danielle was mentioning, move to taking action. We don't want them ultimately just visiting a lot. We want them ultimately taking action. But in order to achieve some of these outcomes online, you have to have the right crew and the right equipment in place. And there's a wide spectrum of kind of levels of expertise and levels of things in place. I mean, that can determine how efficient your media dollars are online, how effective they are, and ultimately the number of patients that you can reach. And so what we're going to share here is some of the best practices, kind of a checklist of these are the things that world-class organizations are doing to use the web to attract more patients. Number one, manage the entire equation. An online marketing campaign and marketing campaigns, because usually it's not just one, are really mathematical equations that have a lot of variables. We'll talk about why it's important to have that all managed in one, kind of by one set of people. Number two, in relative terms, the addiction treatment and recovery industry is one of the more competitive industries online. As such, the opportunity is huge, but also the complexity and execution of campaigns is something that can have a high level of complexity in relative terms to other types of campaigns. And in that realm, you need technology to help you. You can't do this stuff manually. You need technology to help you with that. We also need to be tracking this information, not just to, hey, we know that people saw our ad. Well, that doesn't mean anything. Anybody can do that. What matters is ultimately, did a conversion happen, and even better, did an admission happen, and be able to track that and close the loop. Finally, you got to have access to real-time data. Consistently, we find that people are, have maybe shied away from using online channels because they felt like they were in the dark. They didn't know what the investment was doing for them. That's a thing of the past. You should demand real-time performance data, and there's no reason you shouldn't have that. And then finally, this isn't something that your brother-in-law in a garage can do. You really need people who really understand the inner workings of how the web works, best practice in terms of developing and executing campaigns, and then ultimately people that also understand the unique nature of your industry. So we'll talk about each one of those very quickly. So managing the entire equation. As I mentioned, any online campaign has multiple variables across it. It's not the same as buying TV, where we're saying, okay, we're going to buy some TV or buy a news piece of news advertising on a newspaper that's going to run on Sunday, and it runs on Sunday, and cool, we're done. A digital campaign is a living, breathing thing with lots of variables that are part of the equation. And this little visual aid is not meant to be is not all encompassing. There's even more variables than this. But there's things. All these little changes within the equation can affect how efficient the media runs. It can, changes to the ad copy, changing to the bidding strategy, changing to the targeting, changing to the creative. All of those can affect whether people choose to take action or don't. And just small percentage changes can have big outcomes in terms of the number of admissions. And so what is not best practice is to have a lot of different parties trying to manage different pieces of the equation at the same time. And a lot of times that's what we found that folks have gone through in the past, where they've had an agency build the ads, and they had their internal web guy try to build the landing page, and then they had another guy do the digital campaign, and then they had somebody else try to track the calls, and then somebody else tried to work with the admissions team. And ultimately, that might work, but you're going to spend probably, could be 50 to 60% more to achieve the same results versus having an organization or a team in place that can pull all of this stuff together. So that's really what you want to look for, is somebody that can manage that entire equation and align it with your objectives. It'll reduce the risk of execution with the campaigns, and you'll get more for your dollars. Number two, technology-enhanced bid management. So part of using Google's platforms is, without getting too technical here, is that there's a lot that goes into how and what you're willing to pay for the placement of ads across kind of all of these platforms. Again, there's a lot of components to Google's platform that will help you there, but when you have lots of campaigns and lots of these equations going simultaneously, it's impossible for a human to kind of take on by themselves. So, and ideally, you want a human that's really experienced and really understands your industry and really understands the nature of your patients, but is equipped with technology that's going to help them focus on the right things at the right time. And that's a real critical part, because it'll reduce the guesswork that can often go into these. And when something goes right, you'll know why it went right. Or when something goes wrong, or you get reduced performance, you'll know why that performance happened. A lot of times without technology helping people that are managing these campaigns, things will go really good and you don't know why. Or things will go really bad and you don't know why. Technology solves that. And then finally, this can be more critical, is especially in this industry, in this vertical, where the value of admissions is so high from a revenue perspective and from an outcome perspective in terms of what happens if people don't find you, is that you need to be able to track all of your online marketing dollars down to the conversion and the ultimate admission. And the technology is in place today, and you should expect this. I mean, this is not rocket science. The technology is available to be able to track all of the phone calls, all the interactions, all of the form submissions, all the chats, all of those things that have been driven by your marketing investment, and track them back to where they came from, what ads, what campaigns, what worked, and then actually connect that through working with your call intake team and your admissions team. Close the loop with who, if we generated 100 phone calls, for example, we want to be able to take those 20 that we know became admissions last month. And there's two things that happen whenever you're able to close the loop there, and if you have the technology and the team to do that. Number one, you get your ROI. You know that you put this amount of investment into the machine, and this amount of investment came out of the machine. Which is huge, and it means that you're able to actually understand what your marketing investment is doing, and make sure that it actually is delivering a return. Number two is that for organizations, at least like Scorpions, we're able to take that information and then optimize your campaigns. The beautiful nature of what Google's platform allows you to do is to really optimize your investment based on what is driving not just clicks, not just calls, but actually admissions. And so what we want to do is take those people that we know became admissions, look at the past, the click past, as Danielle was alluded to earlier, the journey online of what they did to ultimately become an admission, and then optimize all of that equation around what drove admissions and ultimately revenue. And in order to do all that, and during that time, this data, the beautiful nature of digital marketing is that this data should all be available to you real time, and it also should be available to you in an easy to understand format. And many of our clients have said, yeah, I always felt like I was in the dark. I didn't really understand what our digital marketing was doing. I just knew that we were doing stuff, and it wasn't easily available to me. And when I did get information, it was an out of date. It was a spreadsheet that was out of date the minute I got it. Well, you should demand more. You should have access to data, but data that's really easy to understand. And then finally, we would submit that this specifically for your industry, you need to work with A players. There are a lot of companies out there and organizations, and again, the brother-in-law, that could technically place some digital advertising for you. We would say that when having the right people that understand your industry, understand the technical sophistication that's required to really be competitive and maximize the amount of dollars that you've got to attracting patients, is important to work with really reputable organizations that have all of the pieces in place and are really able to manage the entire equation. That entire journey online from broadcast to conversion and ultimately admission. If you don't have those things in place, ultimately fewer patients are going to be reached, and you're not going to maximize the amount of potential value you can get from your investment. So to kind of sum that up, what's the checklist of things that you need to make sure your organization has in place? Number one, that you've got folks that are looking at the entire equation. They're not just looking at one piece of running digital marketing online. They're not looking at just the ad copy or just the creative or just the bidding, looking at the entire thing. Number two, that they've got access to technology to help them. They can't just do it manually. Number three, you should expect that you have the ability to track all of this down to ultimately the admission, assuming you have a call team and an intake team that's got a robust enough intake process to be able to capture that data and close the loop. Number four, you should expect real-time performance data of what your campaigns are doing, and your executive team should be able to look at this just as easily as your marketing team and understand what's going on. And then number five, you need A players. There's a lot of people out there, a lot of companies out there that can do it, a lot of people out there technically can do it, but there's probably a smaller subset of organizations that are really effective at doing this the right way, and there are definitely right and wrong ways to do this.
Yeah, and Brian, just to jump in here, so Danielle here again. I've worked with companies or groups or facilities or treatment centers that do this well, and I've worked with others that don't well. And just to reiterate what Brian's saying here, understanding what your marketing dollars are doing for you as an organization, even if you're not the person right now in charge of marketing, knowing that those dollars, and that's where really kind of like the marketing side of the house marries up to the financial side of the house, because online, with everything being trackable, with knowing what's leading to a phone call, what's leading to an admission, and what's not. If you're not tracking that, then those dollars are not being well spent. When you do track them and when you do kind of play with those levers, as he talks about with kind of bid management and the tracking on the conversions, when you start to get very sophisticated in terms of how you're fiddling with those levers, it's going to be profitable for your organization, and those dollars are going to go to work for you. So you kind of end up getting to a point where you're moving marketing out of the operating expense bucket and moving it into kind of a revenue driver for profitable growth bucket. And, that's kind of where we're, take the patients out of it for just like a hot second and think about the business dynamics of it for your facility. This is a great way, when you have everything in place right, to really be able to move the lever and be a profitable organization, and then kind of take my hot second away and bring the patient back into it and really be able to make a big impact and save those lives.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, if there's no margin, there's no mission, right? So we have to consider that there is that aspect of it as well. And then, truthfully, because of the revenue value of a potential patient in the addiction treatment market in relative terms, and Danielle, I don't know this off the top of my head, but I know if you looked at the entire online marketing industry as a whole and looked at which ones are more competitive than others, addiction treatment is in the quadrant of very competitive. So it's right up there with things like insurance and other verticals that are very competitive online. And it's probably, in terms of healthcare, it's probably the most competitive category. So again, that's why doing this stuff right can really be the difference between being successful or not being found at all. So just one quick case study here of what happens when you do everything right. And I know Danielle's works with some folks that are doing this right, and so is Scorpion. And I just want to share some results of a client of ours that is really doing everything right. Launched campaigns, kind of moved off of the way they had been doing it. Again, a lot of the things that we described here in terms of not doing things right. Web presence was kind of a mess. They didn't have access to their data. The folks that were running their digital were charging them ridiculous fees that they didn't know were fees, and it wasn't transparent to them. They had no access to data. All these problems were kind of in place. Well, we cleaned all that up and moved them to really a world-class approach. And the net result was 100% of improvement in media efficiency over the next 6 months. So 6 months later, they were getting twice the amount of volume in terms of admissions than they had been before. They also saw in that 6 months they had moved to all-time highs in admissions driven by online channels. And since that time, and this is over probably a 24-month or more period, they've seen consistently a greater than an 8-to-1 return on their advertising dollars because they've been able to close all that loop all the way through. So really powerful in what they've been able to do, and it really helped more patients. So some key takeaways, things to take back to your organization and ask the questions. Number one, do you have a marketing strategy that includes online media? Is your website very high quality and mobile friendly? If it's not, it's time to look for a new plan. Number three, are your metrics transparent and real time? Are they easily available, and do you understand what's going on? Do you have a team that has access to the right technology to maximize your media efficiency, or are you trying to do it manually? Also, are you able to connect your admissions to specific conversion pathways? Really important. And finally, do you have the right crew in place? So to sum all this up and kind of review, we know there are thousands of people that are not getting the help they need because they can't find it. These people are looking for your types of organizations online, and there are key strategies that are critical that will help you attract more of those patients. And then ultimately, if we can do our job really well and we can reach that person or their family member just a few days quicker, it could be the difference in their outcome. So three main things to take away. Number one, use the web to broadcast your services to patients in their time of need. There's no better way and there's no quicker way to get in front of them in that moment where they're looking for your services. Number two, intentionally seek to reduce the uncertainty in the mind of the patient through their online journey and really look at that entire patient experience and think about their experience in looking for you as part of your patient's experience as well. It's not just when they come in the door, it's when they're first looking for you and when they first find you online. And then finally, have the right team and technology in place to close the loop between your marketing investment and your admissions and ultimately revenue so that you can take that information, maximize the amount of admissions you're getting for the marketing dollars you're investing, and hopefully save more lives. So with that, we'll move to the Q&A session, and I'll turn it back over to Tom.
All right. Thank you, Brian. Brian and Danielle, for a very informative presentation. We've had some questions coming in from our audience already. However, we would like to remind you that you can use the Q&A area below the slides to submit a question at any time here over the next 10 minutes or so while we're still with you. One question that we had come in, how can a small nonprofit agency who doesn't have the benefits of having a marketing team increase their marketing capabilities? And can you just kind of maybe give some like a streamlined or slimmed down thought in terms of like what the smaller players in the industry can do if they don't have endless resources to work with?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, that's honestly the beauty of good marketing and finding the right, two components of that. One is finding the right team to help you. Organizations like ours, and I'd say, even Danielle, part of the beauty of online marketing is that it is scalable. So depending on your resources, there's ways to scale these strategies based on what you have available, based on your targets, based on a number of things that allow you to scale these to hopefully, fit a lot of budgets. Now, that being said, this is a competitive market, and it does take some investment. I mean, given the revenue value of many of these patients, there's other people going after them too. So you have to be willing and ready to make that investment. But I'd say that in general, there's no reason that even small players can't get really competitive. Many times we see larger organizations that may have a little bit bigger presence. Sometimes they're maybe not quite as agile as potentially smaller players that can really differentiate themselves into a niche. And so, a lot of times it's just a matter of looking at what are your competitive differentiators, where you have an advantage, making sure that those things are brought forth online, and then scaling from a digital perspective. If you're really limited on your budget, then looking at where can you get the maximum amount for what you have. And that's where using a lot of the best practices we talked about here can help you do that. And if you do these things the right way, you don't have to necessarily spend as much to get the same results. But if you're not doing these things, you won't have the media efficiency to really be able to squeeze the maximum amount of patients out of what you have. But I guess in a nutshell, Tom, it's really all of these things are scalable, and it's about finding the right team to help you tailor an approach that'll match both your organization's capabilities as well as your outcomes that you're trying to shoot for.
All right.
And I think Brian did a really good job answering that question. The one thing I'd add is just test and iterate. So I think once you get that kind of that destination for them to come, like your website that you're proud of and can stand up, and it's a place that's going to answer questions. Even with a small budget, you can start to test and figure out what works best for your organization, and then iterate on that. And the beauty with online marketing is every dollar in is going to give you some sort of ROI on the way out. So it's just figuring out kind of how to maximize those dollars, and then, what I was saying before, how do we turn this into an expense to actually like a patient driver for the business?
Yeah, one of the things we've seen is the reason budgets are so small and so restricted many times is because the executives at those organizations have never been shown a return for any investment. And so that's where a lot of times it's an iterative process where a small investment nets results that we're able to account for. We're able to show revenue for that, and then you'd be surprised how quickly budgets open up once the executive team and C-level folks are seeing results, and you're able to actually do attribution on those things.
Do you find that someone who's seeking treatment typically wants all of the information about a facility on a homepage, or will they spend time looking through the site? And how do you weigh the balance between trying to keep things organized in different parts of the site while still making information as quickly as accessible as possible?
That's a good question, and it's a really important one because it's something we work with a lot of clients on all the time, especially in terms of the website, is to understand that the home, everybody kind of focuses, and certainly I can appreciate internally where you maybe have internal stakeholders that want their information on the front page. But it's important to understand, and Danielle can, she's at Google, she can allude to this, is that consumers don't necessarily always enter your website through the front page. Google indexes your entire page and is actually helping, if it's done the right way and it's set up to be indexed the appropriate way. Many times the consumer, when they're looking for a specific thing, they'll be directed directly to that subpage. They may not ever even come in through the home page initially. So the important thing with the front page is to make, in the home page, is to make sure that it is focused on the patient in terms of what you get from us. What we often experience is a lot of times organizations will want to say how great they are. That's cool, but really what it needs to be about, hey, when a patient arrives here, did we confuse them or did we make it more simple? Did we increase their uncertainty or did we reduce their uncertainty? And those are really the kind of way to think about that front page is what does it do for the patient? And don't think that the patient is always going to use your homepage as a table of contents or directory. Google, in many cases, is going to help, maybe take that search right to page 3 that's about, alcohol treatment, and that's one of the things you do. They may end up directly on that page. And then in conjunction with search campaigns, you're going to take them to possibly even a more customized page that's about specifically what they were looking for in that search. And so it's important not to think of the website as the main door to the website is the front page, because they may come in from multiple doors. Now, that said, the front page, the home page needs to be, I think there's a couple of key things we would think about is there's no reason that it shouldn't be visually striking, very high quality, but overall more simple than complex, and really focused on getting them, knowing the questions they're going to ask, and then getting them to a point where they're willing to take action, giving them the pathway to take action pervasively throughout the site.
Yeah, and in the spirit of taking action, just thinking about how much of this traffic is happening on mobile, and sometimes we, forget that the mobile phone is also a phone. We're, so used to doing texting and browsing the internet, but sometimes, when they come to your site, make sure it's easy for them. Once they kind of get the information they need, make sure it's easy for them to make that call. I've seen, the kind of pervasive toolbar that stays on the bottom, maybe with the ability to click to call. There's a number of ways that can happen, but when they're on a phone, make sure you're giving them that option.
Yeah, and again, that design aspect is not something that there's professionals, there's people who are really smart that know how to really dial in that experience relative to your team. So it's important to have the right people to help you with that.
All right, I think we've got time. We can sneak in one more question here quickly. We had a member of our audience ask, how do they find the right team? And I think what they're looking for there is if you are a provider looking to partner with a marketing firm or an agency to help you out with a lot of the stuff that you've discussed today, what are the kinds of questions that you should be asking to make sure that you're finding the right partner to work with you and deliver the best results?
Yeah, great question. Again, I kind of go back to some of the checklist there. Number one, and again, needs to be an organization that can demonstrate that they have the technical competency to do complex and high-value campaigns. And usually, they're going to have some type of technology that they've got that can help them with that. They need to be reputable. Google has a great program for vetting various companies that vets them based on their domain expertise. So do these organizations understand the industry and the nature of your particular domain? In other words, this is something Scorpion focuses on, but we don't do automotive, right? We're not good at marketing cars. We're good at healthcare. So there's different organizations. You're going to want to find somebody that understands your industry. Number two, they need to have a level of technical competence, and I know that may be hard to discern always, but again, Google has a great program that designates the organizations that have levels of competence with their Premier program. Number three, they need to have great customer service, and part of that is also Google's program that really vets organizations based on the experience that they deliver for their customers. There's also an element of transparency. So one of the kind of bad things that digital marketing organizations have been sometimes bad experiences have happened when things aren't transparent, when you don't really understand what's going on. And there's two ways that, at least at Scorpion, we solve that. It's kind of a never leave the customer in the dark policy. Number one, it comes from making sure that the customer always has access to real-time data that's easy to understand. When you don't have that and you're operating in a black box scenario, not ideal. That's when things can get murky, and it leaves room for less than ideal practices. Number two is work with an organization that has a good reputation, as we talked about here, has a good reputation and is known for great customer service and getting back to people really quickly. So I'd say that, number one, reputable organization that understands your industry, that has been vetted by others and has a track record, but then clearly has the technical expertise and has a method for providing data back to you real time, and then also is able to demonstrate the ability to work with your intake team to close the loop on the admissions component. You really need all of those pieces in place, and there's good companies out there that'll do that.
All righty. Well, I think that's going to be just about all the time we have for questions for today. But I want to thank Brian and Danielle once again for an excellent presentation. I'd also like to thank our sponsors, Foundations Recovery Network and Urgent Medical Billing, for making today's program possible. Finally, thank you to all of you in our audience for participating today. We hope you'll join us in the future for another Addiction Professional webinar. This concludes today's presentation. Have a great day.